the gift card to the all-you-can-eat clam chowder from Robert Kraft of Vrabel was probably a dead giveaway.
Clam chowder and masseuse shops. Him and Deshaun Watson have that in common. Come on down to Florida, get you a massage.
Welcome in, guys, to Sports Bluff Week 18. It's done. It's a wrap. That's all she wrote. The fat lady has sung. We are out a lot of money from fantasy leagues and pick'ems. But hey, that's another story for another day that we'll never actually come on air and talk about because it's embarrassing. Two guys who have a podcast about football. We've gotten decimated in every league that we are in, fantasy-wise. But anyway, regardless, Week 18's in the books. The playoffs are just around the corner. They do start next week. If everybody wanted to just mark that down on your calendar, playoffs start next week. Can you believe it's here? Can you believe the playoffs have finally arrived?
Honestly, no, it flies by. Like, the season absolutely flies by. But I'm excited because, and maybe it's just, it's hard to remember, like, the way every year plays out week by week, but it feels like this year was pretty much settled 3 weeks ago. Like, yeah, you had the drama with Tampa and Atlanta, and you had kind of like where the seeding falls, but it feels like really after the week before Christmas, we kind of knew where everything was headed. So I'm not wishing the season away, but like, as I said, like, we knew where everything was going. I'm ready to get to the playoffs. I'm ready to see some of these matchups. We usually do more back and forth, buddy. I don't have time for it. I think we got to jump straight into that Minnesota-Detroit game.
Well, the playoffs had to run straight through Ford Field, and oh boy, did Ford
Yes.
Field run over the Vikings.
Wow.
Man, a decimation tonight, 31-9. Not one touchdown scored by what we thought was a very high-powered offense with Sam Darnold leading the way.
Ryan, it was never close.
Didn't appear.
Never close.
Didn't appear that way. I'll tell you what, and what I've noticed throughout the game is the red zone offense for the Vikings is absolutely trash. They didn't run the ball at all. They didn't call smart play calls. Sam Darnold misses wide open guys. It's just a cluster. It was terrible. I know it was on the road at Detroit, which is a hard field to play. That's no excuse, though.
This is for the number one seed. This is for your season. This is the playoff life. The difference in having the week off and home field advantage for the playoffs versus having to start on the road in LA. Like, if the Vikings want to make it to the Super Bowl now, they have to win 3 straight road games, whereas Detroit gets to rest up. And, I mean, they're just in the driver's seat. I wouldn't have been shocked if you told me Detroit won this game, Ryan. If you'd have told me they dominated and won 31-9 and the game was over at halftime, I didn't see this one coming. I actually thought the Vikings were going to win this game.
Yeah, so let's elaborate a little bit more on Detroit because I want to talk about the winner first. They deserve it. So obviously they locked up the 1 seed. That they needed that tonight. They needed that win. Do you feel better about this performance? Like, do you feel better about the Lions overall after this performance tonight?
Absolutely. I have more belief in them. I feel better about them after this performance. My lack of belief in Detroit wasn't anything to do with Detroit. It was just the injuries. It was the defensive injuries that just kept piling up. Even tonight they had some. Terry Arnold went out, one of their corner from Alabama, who is kind of a big deal. And somehow they were still able to perform. I'll say this, Alex Anzalone returning, I don't think we can overstate how huge that was for Detroit because it is unbelievable how bringing him back, we knew he was a great player for Detroit, but I didn't think his addition would make this big a difference to that Detroit defense. Ryan, the defense was fantastic tonight. Absolutely fantastic. Part of that you give to the players. A lot of that, in my opinion, I think you give to Aaron Glenn and the defensive staff coming up with a way to attack Minnesota. We will get into Minnesota, so I won't touch on Darnold specifically here, but Detroit's just relentless pressure on Darnold, constantly blitzing and collapsing the pocket. Collinsworth did a little demonstration at one point in the game that talked about it to where they weren't really getting out of the edges and pushing for the sack. They were just trying to condense the pocket on Darnold and make him start to feel the rush, and he obviously did. It affected the game. He was bad. My one issue with Detroit, the reason I didn't believe in them was because I didn't think they could survive the defensive injuries. Look at their last couple weeks. They were having to outscore people. They were having to get in shootouts. Well, one, they didn't have to do that today, even though they could have because Jahmyr Gibbs had 4 touchdowns. Thank you for that. Lost a parlay on it. With that said, the defense showed up and held a Minnesota offense that you said we all thought was really coming on at the right time, held them to 9 points. It just wasn't close. This was a dominant statement performance from Detroit. And now the road to the Super Bowl goes through Ford Field.
Yeah, I mean, let's just look at the past 3 games. The Bills scored 48 points on them. The Bears scored 17, and the 49ers, they scored 34.
The 49ers put up 34.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then you look at the Vikings tonight, man, and you think, well, this was the big match that everybody has been talking about for the past 3 weeks.
Yes.
This is the one everybody had eyes on, and Detroit comes out and says, no, we got it.
Yeah.
Y'all don't worry about us. And look, I'll give a lot of credit to Hutchinson, too, on the sidelines. He was talking those guys up. He was coaching them through.
Yes.
He was being everything he could be while not on the field.
They came in with a game plan, and they executed it to perfection. You could tell from really the first quarter of that game, and even to your point about the way Hutchinson was handling the sideline, wasn't there just a calm to them? Like,
yes.
You could see the pressure on Minnesota's. Right. You could feel the pressure on Minnesota. You could feel that it was a big game. And despite where you should have felt the pressure for Detroit, despite the injuries and all the issues and all the factors they've had to overcome, Detroit just looked absolutely ready for the moment. Chris Collinsworth talked about where he spoke to Jared Goff like before the game, and Goff said, hey, man, I know how to play these guys. Like, I'm not worried at all. They went in there 100% sure that they were going to dominate that game, and they did, and it's a credit to Dan Campbell and that staff and what he's built at Detroit. The Detroit Lions are 15-2, and they're the 1 seed. The laughing stock of the NFL our entire lives, and they're 15-2.
Same record as the Chiefs, by the way.
Unbelievable.
Same record. One thing I will say about Hutchinson, keep an eye on him. They're keeping it a little hush-hush of when he's going to come back. We think he's going to be there if they make it to the Super Bowl, no doubt. But one of the reporters said
there's a little doubt.
I think he's going to be there. And just one of the reporters tonight on the sideline, she was like, yeah, I talked to him. He couldn't elaborate on when his return would be. Obviously, he's not going to show his cards, right, if he could come back earlier. But he looked pretty healthy walking around the sideline tonight. That's all I'm saying. Just keep an eye on him. Whether or not he's on the field or not, he impacts his team. It's clear. It's obvious.
Well, with the addition to, even without him, the addition of Zadarius Smith has really helped them because he made a lot of crucial plays in this game. Without Hutchinson, and if they hadn't added Zadarius Smith, they're really hurting for edge pressure. They're hurting for that guy that can go get after the quarterback. Smith has been that guy. So now you can only imagine if Detroit was able to put themselves in a position to make the Super Bowl, maybe get Hutchinson back, you get him and Zadarius Smith, all of a sudden this defense you were really worried about is coming after you.
Well, throughout the night tonight, the blitz, they were just obliterating the Vikings offensive line.
It was brutal.
There was no counter blitz at all. The Vikings were throwing out plays that just didn't make sense. Even Collinsworth was like, they need to throw some quick slants, like get the ball out fast, get some confidence back in Darnold. They just couldn't do it. And aside from the one wide open, I think it was Jordan Addison on the right side, top of the screen.
Yeah, top of the screen to the right of Darnold. They ran a rub route. And it worked. They got the pick, rub route, whatever you want to call it, and Addison was wide open.
And Darnold looked.
Me and my wife were watching, and my wife was like, I don't think he looked that way. I was like, I don't know, I think he did. And we rewound it and watched, and literally, he's looking. The play's designed to go there, and he comes off the read. And it's so funny. My wife never watches football with me, almost never. We were watching that game literally before the first quarter was up. She said, man, she didn't know his name, but she was like, the Vikings quarterback holds on to the ball a long time. I was like, he sure does.
Well, especially when he's under that type of pressure. But aside from that one blown coverage or pick route, rep route, whatever you want to call it, it's designed to get somebody open quick, especially in red zone offense.
And he didn't take it.
The defense overall for the Lions it was terrific tonight, but that red zone defense was lights out. They were sticking to the receivers, flushing Darnold out. And there was, I think, 2 or 3 times they went for it on 4th and goal, didn't get it.
No.
They could have put up another 9 points probably on the scoreboard with field goals if they would have just took the points.
And then when they did kick the field goal and not go for it, they missed it. That summed up their entire night, no matter what they did. And like you said,
then before half, that kick out of bounds. I think it was with the big penalty that allowed them to get down there and score 3 more points. By the way, Jake Bates, this dude will be talked about. There'll be a book written about him or a documentary done. This dude's awesome. Like, I just love his story, being a brick salesman in Houston, getting a phone call, coming out and just showing out.
Just delivering.
One of the best kickers in the league right now, if not the best. So kudos to the Lions and this whole organization. What Dan Campbell's doing there is, you may want to call it reckless at some point, and we thought it was earlier, at the game tonight. When they lined up 4th down, 4th and goal, and we was like, you texted me, you were like, this is stupid, this is dumb. And then they sent the motion, they did that turbo, and every time after the turbo, the next action word is the snap. They caught the Vikings, and they got the first down that led to a touchdown for Jahmyr Gibbs. who had a stellar night, by the way. My gosh.
I texted you and said this is dumb because I thought they were going for it, as did the Vikings.
Because that's Dan Campbell's MO, right?
Exactly.
Like, that's what he does. He goes for it on these wild fourth downs that you got the points right there.
Well,
at
the
that
points
point,
to
the
go
game,
up 3 scores. It's like if you go for it and don't get it, it's only a 2-score game. Just take the 3, and now it worked out because they didn't have any intention of going for it. They did what they needed to do. But it's so funny because the team that we were, at least me, and not just me, a lot of people were talking about it, worried about the Detroit Lions, worried about them because of their defense. And then tonight, with the right scheme, with the pressures, with the guys standing up, the way the corners were able to hold up, they held up against Jefferson. Yeah, Darnold sold some throws, but I mean, the coverage was sticky. And to have that kind of coverage with all those blitzes, it was impressive, Ryan. I think right now, I went from thinking that Detroit's going to have a long road in the playoffs if they want to make it, to now thinking who's going to stop them? Maybe Philadelphia, but if we're going towards the Philly-Detroit matchup, it's going to have to be in Ford Field. They're going to have to beat them at home.
The Lions are just dogs, man. They remind me of the Sandlot team for some reason. Like, they just have that rough, tough edge to them that is just a little outside the box, but it works. It wins some football games. They're 15-2 with a 1 seed. You can't complain there. Let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings because I do want to touch on them. Yes. I know we've kind of danced around it a little bit. Let's just flat out talk about it.
Yes, please.
Are you concerned after this loss? And they travel to LA to face the Rams now. So, like you said, 3 games back to back. Like, where do you stand with the Vikings after this performance tonight?
I'm definitely concerned. So I would say me and you probably were the more cautious of anybody that talks about sports or has a YouTube channel about jumping on the Vikings bandwagon. Now, we both love Kevin O'Connell. We both agree he's one of the best coaches in the league, no doubt about it. The question
especially
was
at his age.
Oh, of course. The question was always the Sam Darnold regression. And I said early in the season, remember, he came out like 2 or 3 weeks into the season, was playing real good. You said, hey, you ready to back off that take? I said, nah, man, we are riding it till the wheels come off. And then a couple weeks ago, I was like, I don't know, we might have to back off that take. You said, I'm not letting go yet. Finally, we have waited all season for the Sam Darnold regression. It waited till the 12 o'clock hour, right when the clock struck doom, and here it is. He delivered an absolutely abysmal performance. And I don't want to be too hard on him because he's had an incredible season, but a lot of the Vikings' issue tonight, Ryan, really boiled down to quarterback play. It wasn't all on him. Obviously, the defense didn't do him any favors. They couldn't really get a run game going. The wide open miss to Jordan Addison, sailing balls to Justin Jefferson, holding on to the ball too long, taking sacks. It was just a Sam Darnold special tonight. And to me, it looked like he felt the pressure of the moment. And for the first time this season, he kind of cracked under the pressure.
Yeah, so does that carry over into these playoff games now that nobody is looking at this game? Because this game, like I said, was hyped up for 3 weeks. I mean, it was the marquee game that everybody want to look at. But now that that's passed and he's had the rough game, he's had the really bad game, do you think that it kind of changes a little bit? Do you think it changes up? Or do you think he kind of maintains this now the weight of the playoffs are on him and it's just going to make him succumb to a lot more bad quarterback play?
That's honestly a great question. It's like now that, in a weird way, now that the pressure's off of them.
Yeah, spotlight's kind of turned, and I'll tell you where it's going to face, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it's going to face to the Ravens. I'll tell you that. That's where the spotlight's going to
Sure. So, well, even just saying the NFC, people were doubting Detroit because the injuries, thinking they couldn't do it. Vikings were on a roll. Now, Detroit's done it. They've won. All the pressure's back on Detroit to deliver that first Super Bowl. Yeah. You do wonder, like, now that the pressure is off of the Vikings, can they cruise through that? I'll just go ahead and tell you, I think we can talk about the games a little bit later. I do think there's a very good shot they beat the Rams. I like the Rams. I just don't know if the Rams have the offensive firepower to really compete with some of these top tier playoff teams. I mean, they're so reliant on Puka Nacua. So I could see the Vikings beating the Rams. I could maybe even see them beat another team. But if they get into the NFC Championship against Detroit or against Philadelphia, because they're going to be on the road the entire playoffs, I don't think I see Sam Darnold go into the Link or go into Ford Field and winning with the Super Bowl on the line. I don't. I think the pressure being taken off of them or the spotlight being taken off of them might help them next week. I don't know how far that carries because it does kind of feel like they've been exposed. I know it's a division rival. I'm not saying Minnesota couldn't make a Super Bowl run. They absolutely could. They are still talented enough. But when you get beat like that, in prime time, in what is a literal playoff game, the difference between the 1 and the 5 seed, that's tough, man. You're going to be licking your wounds all the way to the playoffs.
Yeah, I couldn't help but notice that when the playoffs are here, because like you said, this is essentially a playoff game, right? I mean, we can just call it what it is. It's kind of the preliminary playoff game. I couldn't help but notice that not only did Sam Darnold take a huge step back and regressed at this game, but it wasn't just him. It was the offensive line. It was the coaching. It was the play calling. I just feel like one team was so much more prepared, that being the Lions, than the Vikings were. And I think that's inexcusable. Like when you've known that this game is coming up on your calendar for the past 3 weeks, there's no excuse for playing this bad. And I don't think I have the faith in them to go in and beat Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay at LA. Like I don't see that happening. I think LA is just stacked in the offense. I think they'll outscore them. I think the Vikings could put up points, but I just think that the Rams are going to outscore the Vikings next week. I could be wrong, and I know I'll hear it in the comment section, I'm sure, but there's a possibility that the Rams could just put their foot on the throat of the Vikings and just choke them out, man.
I don't think that can happen because the Rams haven't been able to put up points against anybody except for that game against the Bills. I know, but that's a one-off at this point.
But Matthew Stafford in the playoffs and Cooper Kupp in the playoffs and Sean McVay in the playoffs are just different. They're just different.
Cooper Kupp's washed. Let's just be honest. He is not who he used to be.
Oh, you're going to get so much flack for that.
Watch the fall games. He's the water boy.
I don't think he's washed. He's not as good as he once was. I get that. I just don't think he's washed.
He is washed. The Rams offense counts on Puka Nacua. It lives and dies by Puka Nacua. We'll see how much he can do. But not to get too far off that, last point on Minnesota. You said it felt like one team was prepared tonight and one team wasn't, and you used the word inexcusable. I thought maybe that was a bit harsh, but you're right, especially too because it's a division rival. And you think like, oh, a division rival, those are tough games. You can lose those. But you shouldn't lose them like this. I mean, how many times have we seen Kansas City taken down to the wire by the Raiders, by, the Broncos? The Bills and the Patriots play tight games sometimes. The Bills and the Jets. Division rivals are supposed to know you so well that they're able to keep you in close games, even when you are mismatched talent-wise. And if you had asked most people, I think most people would have said Minnesota probably had the edge on talent if you just looked at the roster lineups going into this Sunday night game, considering the injuries and everything. So for Minnesota to come in and be that unprepared, like you said, it wasn't just Sam Darnold. It was the offensive line. It was the receivers. Jefferson wasn't on his game. Hawkinson wasn't really on his game. Take it to the other side of the ball too, Ryan. Minnesota's defense has been really good against the rush, and Jahmyr Gibbs just absolutely destroyed them. It wasn't just the lack of offensive production, it was the inability for the defense to get any kind of stops, any kind of momentum. It was clear pretty early on in the game that Sam Darnold and the Vikings offense needed a spark. Someone needed to provide Minnesota a spark in that game, and literally no one was able to do it.
The fun fact is that the Lions and Vikings played in Week 7. I think the Lions scored 31 points then, too. So not only is this inexcusable, you've been here before. You've played them once already.
And that was a close game.
And it was a very close game. And now it looks like one team did their homework and you didn't. Well, now with the spotlight off of Detroit and Minnesota, it now turns to none other than the MVP race, really. And two candidates that I think everybody are talking about, and we'll touch on them briefly, is Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Let's touch on Lamar first. His playoff record is not great. He made the wild card in 2019, divisional in 2020, a wild card against Tennessee, divisional in 2021, and in 2024. He actually won the divisional in 2024, made it to the next round of the AFC Championship where they lost against Kansas City.
He's 2-4 in his career in the playoffs.
So this is where everybody talks about, and of course we'll wrap in the MVP with this too, but
sure,
Lamar in the playoffs, it's rough. It's a rough time for him. That's the one mark on his record. Chris Sims said it best. He's like, we need another Christmas Day game out of Lamar in the playoffs really put him in the upper echelon of like the greats. Obviously Patrick Mahomes has done it. Josh Allen has had those stellar playoff performances, even against Patrick Mahomes. So we've seen it. We haven't seen it from Lamar. This is a huge issue. It's a big red mark on his resume. It's something that needs to be addressed. How do you think? Now I will say this. This is probably the best team all around that he's ever had. You got the running game with Derrick Henry now. You got wide receivers that are just coming into their own. Zay Flowers, Bateman, like they're all great. They're connecting with Lamar. This team is flowing. You had the Christmas Day game. That's the day that every MVP talk changed, right? Does that carry over into the playoffs? Can he finally right all the wrongs, or are we going to get Lamar like we've always gotten Lamar in the playoffs?
I kind of think we're in for what we've always got with Lamar. So I do think whatever he does against the Steelers this weekend does not count. We know, like, we expect you to go out there and beat the Steelers. Okay, you're like 9-point favorites or whatever. They should win that game.
You should wipe the floor with them.
Yeah, we're not even talking about that. We're talking about when you get into...
If they don't, we got a big problem.
Yeah, then this conversation really gets heated up. We're talking about the next week when you have to go to Buffalo, or if you were lucky enough to win that, or not lucky enough, sorry, good enough to win that, and then go to Kansas City. That's the thing, because we just haven't had Lamar deliver a great playoff performance in a big gotta-have-it playoff game. Like last year, they ran through Houston as expected, and then they were at home, had Kansas City come to them, and Lamar just choked. He chokes in the playoffs. You can't ignore it at this point. On the contrary, like to compare it with Josh Allen, yes, Josh Allen doesn't have the MVPs. Josh Allen's never made it to a Super Bowl, but Josh Allen has played spectacular in the playoff games. That 13-second playoff game that the Bills lost to the Chiefs, it wasn't because of Josh Allen, whereas it feels like in the big playoff games for Lamar, he's holding his team back. Lamar just seems to get tight in the playoff games. Anybody with eyes can tell you. I don't need stats. I don't need to look. Anybody that has any understanding of football can watch it and feel it. When we were watching the AFC Championship game last year, Ryan, it wasn't, the first quarter wasn't up, and you were texting me and was like, Lamar looks tight. Like, he's not running. He's not, taking his opportunities. He's wanting to prove he's a passer. He's got the 2 MVPs. Maybe he gets a third this year. That's, he became the leading rusher for quarterbacks. He's got everything. He just needs some good playoff performances. I'll even give you a little bit of a hot take. I don't even think he has to win. I think if he went to Buffalo and had an incredible performance and lost, or went to Kansas City and had a great performance and lost, that would do a lot to kind of quiet some of this narrative. But he has to deliver a great football game. We can't be leaving another Ravens playoff game where we're saying, man, if only they would have handed it to Derrick Henry a couple more times. You're the MVP. You're the guy. You have to go make it happen.
If Lamar walks in and has a game, say against Buffalo, like Allen had against Mahomes in the 13-second game, we're not having a discussion if Lamar can do well in the playoffs. We're saying now, oh, no, Lamar can actually do really well, and the defense may have lost in the game. Or whoever got the ball next was just going to win the football game. Like, that's just how that game was going.
Even Josh Allen's performance last year against the Chiefs was really good. Yeah, he missed Stephon Diggs on the final drive, but he played really good in that game. He wasn't holding his team back where it feels like sometimes Lamar is. And he's just, we'll see. I almost feel like last year's Ravens team was a little bit better because the defense was better, but the defense has been rounding into form the past 4 or 5 weeks. They've been one of the better defenses in the league just based off the last 4 weeks. You've got Derrick Henry. Zay Flowers got injured and this weekend, so that's something to watch. If he's out against the Steelers, will he be able to come back the next week when they have to play Buffalo, most likely, assuming they win? It's something to watch, and I'm waiting for him to deliver that playoff moment because I root for him. I want these guys to do good, and it's the only thing he's missing. Because when we talk about him in the conversation, and you hear some people do that already with the 2 MVPs, possibly a third, as if he's already one of the all-time greats. He's not, in my opinion. He is in the regular season, but to be one of the all-time greats, you got to have some postseason success. He's got a lot of time in his career, even if he completely blunders it this year. I don't think it's over and his story is written. It's just something that's going to go on and we're going to keep talking about for another year.
Yeah, the narrative has to change here. It has to be that Lamar can actually hold his own in the playoffs before...
Hold his own. That's a great way to put it. You don't have to win, just hold your own.
That's it. That's all you got to do. And hopefully we'll see that, but I don't think we should discount, and you said that they should walk in, they're 9-point favorites, and just wipe the floor with the Steelers. Actually, I said they should wipe the floor. But I don't think you should discount Mike Tomlin's defense ever. I'm just saying it can sometimes rear its ugly head. I
would be absolutely stunned if the Steelers beat the Ravens.
I'm not saying they beat them. I'm just saying they play a lot tougher than maybe a 9-point underdog. I think they play a little bit tougher than that in the playoffs. Mike Tomlin's going to have this team prepared a little bit more than he did last week. But let's switch it just a little bit because you mentioned maybe Lamar gets the three-peat in MVP, right? Not, I guess, technically a three-peat, but still,
it'd be two in a row. It would be his third,
third trophy. Do you think right now? Let me just look here. Yeah, so DraftKings has Josh Allen at -230, Lamar Jackson plus 185 on the odds right now. Do you think that carries over? Do you think Josh Allen is still the MVP winner at the end of the season, or do you think Lamar edges him out a little bit?
Yeah, the MVP race is tough, man. It's one of those things like, if I had a vote, if I was voting for the MVP, personally, I would vote for Josh Allen or Saquon Barkley. Like, I'm one of those guys that I don't think it's crazy to vote for Saquon Barkley. I know that's not happening. So let's just talk about quarterbacks because apparently that's all the award is. I digress.
If all is fair, Saquon Barkley should be the MVP. Let's just be honest about it.
Or at least really in the conversation. And he's not. It's really between these two quarterbacks.
The award just needs to be changed to the most valuable QB. Like, it just needs to.
But that's another thing. And this, I'm not trying to rehash all this. There's no real clear guidelines of what you're voting for, because if it was really most valuable player, it would be Patrick Mahomes every year. You know what I mean? Just like if it was coach of the year every year, it would be Andy Reid. So it's like, it's really
an emotional vote. I mean, everybody has their own.
It's an emotional vote and it's a storyline vote.
Yep.
Mixed. So it's a little mix of everything. It's a little mix of most valuable. It's a little mix of narrative. It's a little mix of stats. It's not all three. Because I've seen a lot of Ravens people on Twitter talking about, well, if you look at the stats, Lamar's stats are just, head and shoulders above Josh. It's not even a question. Okay, yes, his stats are better. But last year, the argument was the opposite for Lamar. Lamar didn't have the most amazing stats, but it was like, but the storyline, the team he's doing it with, the resurgence. I would go Josh Allen over Lamar Jackson because I think he is doing it with less. And I think preseason expectations were part of it. The Ravens were expected to be a top contender with the addition of Derrick Henry. They were supposed to have one of their best years. They were supposed to make a deep run. A lot of people who watch the NFL for a living, Ryan, thought about, literally predicted the Buffalo Bills to miss the playoffs. Okay? So that's crazy. You picked them to make it. You were just down on them. But a lot of people...
I never thought that Josh Allen would have the season that he's having this year.
And it's the best season of his career. You look at the difference. Yeah, Lamar, 4,100 yards passing compared to Josh Allen's 3,100. Touchdowns, 41. He has more. I understand that. But the fact that Josh Allen has kind of carried his team, he hasn't won it. Whether it's fair or not, the fact that Lamar won it last year, I think hurts him. You can say, well, Tristan, that's not fair. You should, okay, but everyone else votes that way. So I'm going to treat it the way everyone else does.
With this, so like I was watching McAfee the other day, and one of the guys on the show has a vote, but he made a good point. He's like, look, this isn't a roundtable vote. This is every man for themselves. We all cast a ballot, and we all vote for who us, individually want as the MVP. This, like you said, there's no record that you have to break to get the MVP. There is no rule book that you have to follow to be in the MVP vote or to have your name put in there. So what happens is it's hard to predict. Like, it's just really difficult because you don't know how people are going to feel on any given day. The Christmas Day performance for Lamar really changed everything, changed the landscape, because it was Allen's heads above heels. Like, it was just, nobody questioned it. Now, Christmas Day game comes, and everybody's like, well, Lamar's actually pretty good. But you made a great point, and Herb Street made the same point on one of the Thursday night games about 2 weeks ago. He said, look, I don't care who you are, any human with an emotional vote, if you have one guy that's never won it before and one guy that's won it twice, you're probably going to err on the side of the guy that hasn't won it before.
Can I also add into that? And I know this probably isn't fair and you're not supposed to do it this way. I don't have a vote. Don't yell at me. The fact that Lamar's won it twice, this would be his third time. Josh Allen's never won it. I also, even though I shouldn't, I feel like I kind of look at playoff history I know it's not supposed to be. I know it's not supposed to be. I know it's supposed to be just this year's MVP, but it's like, okay, yeah, but one guy also kind of chokes in all the biggest moments, and one guy kind of plays his best in the biggest moments. He just can't beat Michael Jordan. So maybe let's give him the MVP when his stats are, not that far off. And last year, the argument you would be making for Josh Allen to win MVP this year is the argument people made for Lamar to win it last year. Lamar won it last year when he didn't have the best stats, and there just wasn't a standout quarterback. This year, when you take into the team dynamics, when you take in most valuable, when you take in the guy that has, in my opinion, elevated his team and his franchise the most this season, and that's kind of how I look at MVP. It's like a mix of really good stats, a really impressive statistical year, as well as a great team performance and elevating your team and organization. That's why, in my opinion, it would be between Josh Allen and Saquon Barkley if I was making a vote.
And you can't help but look at the quality of losses this year. Like, the Steelers beat the Ravens earlier this year in November. The Browns beat them. So, like, you also got to look at that, too. Like, the Browns. The Browns beat the Ravens.
True, but they are divisional opponents. I would counter that. You said quality of losses, Ryan. I would hit you the other way and say quality of wins. And I honestly think that Kansas City win, I think the Kansas City win for Josh Allen really kind of just dismantling the Chiefs, beating them by 2 scores. It really kind of didn't feel close in the third quarter. I feel like that's a big feather in Josh Allen's cap that might help him carry this award.
Yeah, I think that's yin and yang. Like, if you look at the quality of losses, you also have to look at the quality of wins, right? Like, your point is valid. So, yeah, I agree. Like, the only team to take down the Chiefs when they're fully healthy, besides the Broncos today,
we don't count that.
yeah, because nobody played, but was the Bills. And they pretty much, I know the score didn't really look like it, but they kind of handled the Chiefs pretty well.
They absolutely did. They completely did.
But they do this every year in the regular season, too. I will admit that. But still, I think that has to factor into your overall. I think you look at everything. If I had to vote, whether or not you're supposed to or not, again, no rule book here, so we can make our own rules. It's the Wild Wild West. It's going to be a QB award. We get to do what we want to. I'm looking at playoff history, who's had it before. It's an emotional vote. I can do what I want to. That's just kind of how I feel about it. I think it's Josh Allen's to win or to lose at this point. I think it should go to him. Besides me having a Bills sign over my left shoulder.
Well, by the way, you also said if we were doing it legit, you would vote Saquon Barkley.
I would.
But I'm not going to vote for him when I know he doesn't have a shot.
Right.
Now,
he's changed the landscape of he's done things that the history books had to alter.
Yes. Now, I believe like 2 or 3 years ago, the NFL MVP changed to ranked choice voting. So now instead of just voting your number 1, like you vote your top 3 or 5 in order. So that could change something. That actually could affect who wins the award. We'll see. Last thing to leave us on this. It's not like if Lamar wins it, if any of these guys win it, if Lamar, Josh Allen, or Saquon won it, I don't think any of them would be undeserving. All 3 of them are deserving MVPs. I personally would go with Josh Allen because I can't go with Saquon because there's no chance. And I think you agree with me there. So if it was just Tristan Bunn, not outside bias, I would go Barkley, Allen, Lamar. But knowing it's a QB award, I think Josh Allen takes it.
Well, the final brushstrokes are in on the playoff picture. It has been painted. The Chiefs in the AFC have the bye week. The Lions, after tonight's performance, they deserve it, and they also have the bye week in the NFC. We'll touch on a couple of games, just to kind of read off the playoff bracket. I'll go ahead and do that first. We can dissect a couple of these games that we want to talk about. So you got the Chargers at the Texans. You got the Steelers at the Ravens and the Broncos at the Bills. That's going to sum up the AFC picture. Moving to the NFC, you get the Vikings at the Rams, the Commanders at the Bucks, and the Packers at the Eagles. Let's go back to the AFC. I want to touch on the Broncos and the Bills real quick.
Yeah.
The Bills are 8.5-point favorites. I think well deserving of that, right? Like we all agree that it should be that kind of spread.
Hold on. We didn't discuss what the question was going to be. I'm throwing this one to you.
All right.
What are the chances of an upset here? Like, do you see any scenario where Denver can upset them? Do you think Denver can keep it close down to the wire? How do you think this game can go? Because I do think Denver's frisky. But I kind of see this game as maybe being close for 2 or 3 quarters, and then Buffalo kind of pulls away.
That's actually exactly what I was going to say. It's how I envision it going. I don't ever want to say that, we should handle them no problem.
Well, you never know.
What it's going to come down to is, well, number 1, weather. That's going to affect it.
Oh, good point.
So number 2, which Denver plays in cold games too, but
sure.
Still, Buffalo is known for their cold games.
That snow up there is a little different.
They play the best in the cold games. Josh Allen's a beast in snow games. But anyway, I think that Denver, look, Sean Payton is going to, the fact that he got the Broncos here to be able to play the Bills in the first round of playoffs is wild, okay? With Bo Nix as the rookie quarterback who everybody kind of glossed over at the beginning of the season. Nobody really talked about Bo Nix being this type of guy. The Broncos at the Bills, on paper, the Bills outmatched them in pretty much every category, and they should win this game handedly. But I think the key to success here is to get pressure on Bo Nix, fluster him, make him a nervous rookie quarterback in the playoffs for his first year, make him actually act like who he is instead of letting him get the hot hand early. I think that could spell trouble for the Bills, and the Bills would have to play that back and forth game for a while. If they want to knock this out early, put the seal on the game, I think they need to come out swinging and then also get Bo Nix flustered in that pocket.
Yeah, I kind of think that's what's going to happen. Bo Nix has been, on and off the past couple of weeks. They kind of have to play a certain type of game. They have to play defense, low score, and run the football. And then he will occasionally hit a big shot or two that kind of breaks the game open. The question I wonder is that Denver defense going to be able to force a couple turnovers? That's the only way I think they win the football game. If Denver can get to Allen and Surtain and Bonito can make some plays and you get a couple crazy turnovers early and maybe you get up and get some momentum, get that stadium doubting themselves, maybe magic could happen then. I think that's the only way, though. Josh Allen and the Bills feel really comfortable in this kind of situation. Okay, Ryan, let's jump over to the NFC real quick. The Commanders going to Tampa to take on the Buccaneers. You've got Jaden Daniels, rookie sensation with Dan Quinn. Got to give you credit because in the offseason you said Washington hiring Dan Quinn. You called it. You said that's a great move. That's the best thing for that franchise. I don't think anybody expected them to be here. I certainly didn't. It's an amazing, impressive season. Tampa was on the ropes against New Orleans. It literally looked like for a minute, oh my God, they're going to lose and Atlanta's going to get in. They survive. I don't know your take on this one. The Bucs are favored by 3.5 points. Ryan, I kind of like Washington here just because I don't know what Tampa team I'm going to get. And it seems like, as we've talked about with the Jaguars, as we've talked about with Tampa, it's that roller coaster team. The Jaguars last year, this year, the Jaguars have never taken off. When we were in Kansas City, we were watching Tampa play Dallas, and we were like, okay, just lock this up against an injured Dallas team and Cooper Rush, and they got boat raced. Like Dallas completely owned them. Today, the Saints almost dominated Tampa. They came back in the second half, but it was close, and it shouldn't have been. Spencer Rattler should not have been, defeating Tampa Bay. If Baker gets hot, if Mike Evans gets hot, if they can get a run game going and the defense gets pressures and sacks, Tampa can be dangerous. But right now, I feel like I trust the Commanders more as a more complete football team. Is that wild?
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. That's a perfect evaluation of this football game. I think that, by the way, let's just take a step back and say that the NFC playoff picture is as of right now, is much more entertaining than the AFC.
By far.
Cannot wait to watch the NFC shake out.
I could be surprised. The AFC is going to be fun next week, like the next round. But.
Right. But there's always a surprise, right? One of these 3 games in the AFC is going to throw us for the loop. I'm fully expectant of that. But the NFC picture, it's just going to be hard-fought football. Any of these teams could beat the other team on any given Sunday. But what we're talking about is the Commanders at the Bucs. Now, downside is they're playing at the Bucs. Hard stadium to play in. Baker Mayfield is a dog when he is playing hot. But like you said about Denver has one game script that they have to run. The Bucs are very similar, man. They have to get that running game going with Bucky Irving. They have to get Mike Evans open.
And they have to get pressure. Yeah,
and they have to get pressure. The defense is lacking. The offense is inconsistent. And I just think that where the Bucs fall short, the Commanders excel. I think the Commanders are a very even flow, even kilt team. And I think that the defense shows up when it needs to. That line can be scary at times. They have to get pressure on Baker. And that secondary, I think the secondary of the Commanders is better than the Bucs. So for them to be 3.5? Yeah, 3.5 point favorites, the Bucs being 3.5 point favorites, I think that's a shot at the Commanders, man. I think that's too big of a, I would definitely take the under on this all day.
Do you agree with me? You think if you had to make a pick right now, Commanders win? Okay.
100%. Yeah.
So to your point,
I would take the under and I would take them straight up.
Right.
Like, no doubt.
So we agreed that they both have inconsistencies. I will say this though, one thing to watch, Marshawn Lattimore, if he comes back and he plays for the Commanders, him and Mike Evans, they hate each other. They absolutely hate each other. That's going to be a matchup to watch. Another guy to keep your eye on in this game, me and you talked about him in the NFL draft. I think in one of our mocks, maybe even our final mock, we had him go in first round when no one else had him go in first round. Sandra, the corner out of Michigan that ended up going to Washington. I know you remember talking about him in the draft. I
remember that name.
He has kind of been a baller the last couple weeks, as me and you kind of predicted he would be. Watch out for him because him and Lattimore, if Lattimore plays, could kind of wreck the Tampa Bay passing attack. I think ever since Jaden Daniels recovered from that rib injury, remember that his ribs got hurt and he looked bad for a couple weeks and they were just off and didn't seem right. It seems like he's recovered and he's been playing his best ball. The thing to me to watch out for is, because Tampa can be inconsistent, if this game turns into a shootout, I kind of think that can benefit Washington, because Jaden Daniels being able to run and make plays and throw dimes, depending on that Tampa defense, if Tampa's not able to get pressure and get sacks, I think Jaden Daniels could torch them. I could see this game going either way, but right now, man, I'm definitely leaning Commanders. I think Washington's going to get the win. Even though I like Tampa, I just think they're too inconsistent.
Well, that brings us to our last game that we are going to discuss. The Green Bay Packers going into Philly, and I just don't feel confident, man. Like, no. I just don't feel like the Packers have what it takes. Jordan Love is
a roller coaster?
The biggest question mark. It's like if the Jags were a quarterback, you know? That's kind of how I feel. It's like it's just up and down. He has these stellar games or these absolute bomb throws dialed in on a rope, laser beams, and then he plays games where he looks like he shouldn't even be the starting quarterback sometimes.
Yes.
This game or this team is, and their success is predicated on Josh Jacobs, not Jordan Love. That this team has to have Jacobs perform well for them to win a football game. And when it's resting on Jordan Love's shoulders, it's most of the time it spells trouble. Jordan Love, when he has no pressure and they're playing an even game, or even if they're a little bit ahead, he can hit those throws, man. But it's when he gets that pressure on him, he just freezes up, you know? And I think that's a huge issue for Green Bay, and they're playing the Philadelphia Eagles, man. Like, by the way, one of the guys on the Philadelphia Eagles is a contestant for the MVP. That's trouble for Green Bay. Green Bay is not the greatest in rushing defense. They're not the greatest in passing defense. I don't know what they're going to do. I think this game, I know that the spread right now is only 4.5. I think it could get really out of hand for Green Bay, especially going into the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth.
I think Green Bay has a better rush defense than you give them credit for. I looked at
not against
top
Saquon
10,
Barkley,
but I agree, and it does feel like sometimes they do get torched. It feels like sometimes they get guys that break one open against them. I kind of disagree with everything you said, but agree with the conclusion you drew. So it's interesting how we get there. You were saying when you have to rely on Jordan Love, like to make a play, that's bad news. I don't know if I necessarily agree. What I kind of feel like the problem for Jordan Love has been his slow starts. It feels like to me, they come out of the gate slow. He doesn't make plays in the first half. And then in the third and fourth quarter, he just has to start cutting it loose. And yeah, he throws a couple lasers and makes some plays there and then throws a pick or two as well. That's kind of the Jordan Love experience. Well, I was really high on Green Bay earlier this season. You know me, I picked them to make it to the Super Bowl. In the NFC, they were the team I was high on. But I just didn't think they would be this inconsistent. You are dead on when you say that their offense runs through Josh Jacobs. He has to have a giant game. And against that Eagles defensive front, especially with Jalen Carter just wrecking everyone that comes near him, it's not just Jalen Carter, though. Zach Bond, who has been a player of the year candidate, he's been incredible. Vic Fangio has that Eagles defense dialed in right now. I don't see Green Bay having a lot of success against this Philadelphia defense. On the flip side, could I see the Green Bay defense shut down Philly's offense? To an extent, I could see that happening. However, I think when push comes to shove, I don't know. We haven't seen anyone all year be able to stop Saquon Barkley. I don't think it's going to start now. I like Green Bay. They were my pick to make it to the Super Bowl. But if you made me bet on this game, I've got to ride with Philadelphia. I'm worried about Jalen Hurts. I assume he's going to be back and the concussion thing's going to be cleared. But if he's not, that could be an issue. Either way, I just feel like Philadelphia is such a more complete team than Green Bay. Green Bay has to have a lot of things go their way to win. It feels like Philly can take whatever you throw at them and turn that to their advantage.
Yeah, and Philadelphia, they've been here, done this. You know, that's another thing you can't forget is they've made it to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl. So,
and I think they still got a chip on their shoulder about the way last year finished, about the collapse down the stretch. I think, say what we want, I'm not a big Sirianni fan, but ultimately the guy wins games. And I think the way the season collapsed last year and then that playoff loss to Tampa, it all fell apart. They've been building and building to get bounced out of this game. I'll tell you this, if the Eagles lose this game, Sirianni might not be safe because it feels like they are, destined for a date with Detroit in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, if they lose this game, they may give Sirianni a call while he's still taking a shower like they did Mayo today.
Yeah, no kidding. Jerod Mayo was still in the locker room, and then he was like, wait, why don't y'all take my keys off my belt?
Yeah, Robert Kraft said, let's expedite this. When, sir? Now?
Yeah, if you'll just go ahead and turn it in.
But he just beat the Bills. Yeah, he's out. I think Mayo probably knew before this game, to be honest with you, but I don't think it probably shocked him to be fired.
All right, let's just jump into that. I'll just clip this wherever I can because I want to talk about that. The Patriots fired Jerod Mayo. Me and you both said when they hired Mayo, it was a disastrous idea.
They had to, it was just, it was like that son that took over the organization just because he was the son.
Because they had it in writing. They had it in writing for like multiple years. Yeah. That's why they didn't have to interview a bunch of candidates. But I know he played there, but other than that, he was like a linebackers coach. And I know, the people that played with him liked him. Well, yeah, I'm sure the people that played with, Jordan Love like him. Doesn't mean he should be a head football coach. We had no reason to believe he was going to be a good coach. He clearly wasn't. And it wasn't just the on-the-field stuff. It was the press conferences. Like, every answer he gave was a disaster. It was laughable. In my opinion, I agree with you. I think Robert Kraft had made this decision well before today. I don't think today's outcome had anything. They had a long statement already printed up. That thing's been sitting on the fax machine for weeks, okay? This was all about Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel went and interviewed with the Jets. Remember, last year, we thought the Patriots were going to hire Vrabel. I think the only reason they didn't is
I said they should have.
Yeah, agreed. And you know me, I'm not even a giant Vrabel fan. Exactly. He's got ties to the franchise. I think Vrabel's overrated. We talk about him like he's a all-time winner. Look at his record. Yeah. He's not. He's average. But he is a culture builder. He will get that program turned around for sure. And he's the right move for what they need, especially when you got a good quarterback like Jerod Mayo. I will give Robert Kraft credit. I told you this. A lot of guys, like CEOs, people in position of power, when they make a mistake, they double down. And they say, nah, this was just 1 year. We're going to give him another shot. Give Robert Kraft credit. I'll give Kraft credit for saying, no, I made a mistake. We shouldn't have hired this guy. We're going to cut him loose. We're going to move on. We're going to get Vrabel. We're going to get somebody to fix this franchise. Realizing that Mayo's not the guy and moving on now, it was the best decision they could have made.
Yeah. I don't know that they didn't realize that when they signed the dotted line to hire him on as the head coach this year.
I agree.
I think they were just like, man, let's just get this over with, bite the bullet, let's do it.
Move on.
And I'm not even so sure that they didn't tell Vrabel that it was going to be his next year. Like, I would be surprised if Kraft and Vrabel didn't find their way on a phone call at some point, either really early in the season or played golf, a round of golf at some point, and Kraft just kind of gave him the nod, like, hey, this is yours.
Told him without telling him.
Yes.
Yeah, I
think the message received very well on Vrabel's side.
I wouldn't have thought about that, but the fact that you said that, 100% chance that happened.
Because there's no way, if you had both of those guys side by side that says, yes, we want the job, that you would not pick Vrabel if you couldn't.
Well, and you know this just from the company you work at, and from I read that Dynasty book Benedict wrote on the Patriots Dynasty, really great book. Everybody should check it out. This is kind of how stuff happens. Like the dealings and the positions, a lot of them happen like that, where you call your guy or you're having, hey man, let's go play golf, and then you're out there and you're being like, yeah, Mayo, not really what we wanted. Swing. Might have to start looking elsewhere. What are your plans for next year? And that's how it happens. That's how these conversations start. I think you're right. If they haven't already basically, offered it to Vrabel, I think Vrabel knows it's his. He did interview with the Jets. I think he's just doing that for leverage. He might get a better offer somewhere else, but we'll see where that goes. Mayo is out.
Now I think the gift card to the all-you-can-eat clam chowder from Robert Kraft to Vrabel was probably a dead giveaway.
Clam chowder and masseuse shops. Him and Deshaun Watson have that in common. Come on down to Florida, get you a massage.
Let's wrap this up before we go off the rails completely. Week 18 is in the books. The playoffs are next. Next week, we kick off the playoffs. Tune in to Sports Bluff. We're going to be covering all of the playoffs. Question to wrap us up. I want to know from each division in the playoff bracket, who is one team that you would replace with another team that didn't get in?
You mean like each conference?
Yeah, one from each conference.
Oh,
I already got mine for the AFC if you want me to kick it off.
Yeah, go ahead. Let me pull up the list.
I'll cover AFC if you want to cover NFC if you want, however you want to do it. But for me, it would be I would remove the Steelers and put in the Bengals.
That would definitely be more entertaining for sure.
The fact that the Bengals got out is just, I hate it, man. Because I hate it, but I love it because I don't want to play them. But
they're just not a good football team, though.
I know, but Joe Burrow in the playoffs just brings viewers, more than
Russell
Wilson.
Something can happen. Yeah, the Steelers have lost 5 straight. They're completely falling apart. When I look at the NFC, man, I got to be honest, there's no one I would sub out. I think we got the right team.
That's why I wanted to give you that one because I wouldn't take the Seahawks, the Falcons, or the Cardinals, which are the next in line out of any of these.
Like you could say maybe the Falcons instead of the Bucks, okay, but like I would rather see Baker and a talented Bucks team with a good coach versus the Falcons, which I really don't know what Penix and Raheem Morris 100%. Are yet. You know what I mean? Like we'll have if Penix had been playing for 6 or 7 weeks, maybe that's the way we would go. But the fact that they put him in the last minute, I think we've got the right lineup in the NFC. As far as like entertainment value goes, yes, you wish the Bengals would have made it, but there's just so many opportunities. That week 1 loss against the Patriots that the Bengals had. The Patriots won 3 games. Like the Bengals have to stop losing games that no other team in the league would lose.
I'm not. I know I've mentioned McAfee before, but I want to just talk about it.
Mention him again.
I will. Look, whether you like him or not, the dude's got views and he gets paid millions of dollars, so he's doing something right. A little bit better than us at this point.
Slightly.
But he made a great point. He said, man, if you're the Falcons, you got to be kicking yourself for not putting Penix in like 4 weeks before you did. Because if you did, you could be talking about the Falcons having that playoff spot now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very, ideally, that's kind of how things would have shook out, you would think.
I don't know why they did. We talked about it at the time, though. It's like it was clear weeks ago that Kirk
Cousins
was washed. It was like the Achilles injury has bothered him. He can't plant. He was getting beat up. He wasn't seeing the field.
They were in the playoff talks at that point too. So why wouldn't are you just so gung ho and heavy set on running a veteran guy out there?
Like, I think it goes back to what we talked about with Kraft and Mayo. You had a plan in place. You paid him $100 million, and it's like, oh, we don't want to deviate from this plan. We don't want to deviate from the plan. Oh, we got to deviate from the plan.
There's also a chance, and I think, I don't know if it was McAfee or First Things First that talked about this, but they were talking about, we don't know what goes on in practices, right? So there's a chance that Penix was looking awful in practice and Kirk Cousins was beating him out every time. Like, that could have happened. We don't know.
I find that hard to believe.
I do too, but I'm just saying
that's true.
That's the only plausible outcome aside from them just being complete buffoons.
Hey, I have an idea. You know what I think is a plausible outcome? I think that the Falcons are a poorly run franchise.
Well, yeah, that too. But look, I mean, just be honest with yourself. If you're saying, and you're in week, when did Cousins come out? 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, something like that?
No, it wasn't even that. It was like 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks, okay.
3 or 4, maybe.
So that's week 15, 14, 15, somewhere around there. So say you're in week, we knew probably about week 10 that Kirk Cousins was washed, and you're in the playoff running. Like, you're a team that people expect to probably make the playoffs at this point. Why would you not say, like, hey, if we see it, I'm sure they see it, right? Like, they're not...
Right.
They get paid millions, we don't, and we could see it. So if you're sitting down at the round table, after the game on Sunday where you got demolished and Kirk Cousins threw 8 interceptions or whatever it is, why wouldn't you say, hey, the only shot we have is to put the kid in?
They benched him after the Falcons-Raiders game, so Penix started 3 games. I think looking back at it, they should have benched him after they lost to the Broncos 38-6. That was on November 17th. You could have argued before that, but definitely losing to the Broncos 38-6, Ryan.
Yeah.
In that game where Kirk Cousins threw for 170 yards and 1 interception. Like, it's a disaster. If you had done it then, which would have been totally logical, then Penix would have had 6 games. And, who knows
how many of the 3 that he started did they win?
They just won 1. But they clearly they put up 34 points, 24 points, and 38 points. They were scoring points. They just weren't able to stop anybody. They weren't a playoff team, but clearly bad decisions are made for bad franchises. Didn't mean to get off on a tangent, but we got a lot to talk about, a lot of things going on. Obviously, next time we log on, by the time you guys watch this, there will be more coaches fired. Is Brian Daboll going to get fired? Is Mike McCarthy going to go? Antonio Pierce in Las Vegas. When we come back next week, we will talk about all the playoff games, and we'll also look at Black Monday, talk about the job openings. We'll have a long show for you because we got a lot to cover. Ryan, thanks for sitting with me. Thanks for all of you for watching and joining along with us for the ride. 2 idiots covering one sport. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about it. We will be here covering the playoffs. We'll see you all next week. Have a safe week. Be safe out there. A lot of crazy weather. Goodbye.